When Lusanda gave up her dreams to build her husband's, she never imagined he'd shatter her world in return. She traded boardrooms for the kitchen, high heels for aprons, all to please Mandlenkosi. But when he walked out with his young secretary, leaving her broken and penniless, no one expected the woman he abandoned would rise from the ashes. And the day he returned, begging on his knees, Karma finally spoke. Lusanda was a smart and hard-working woman, known by many in Mbabane as one of the best banking officers. She had worked for years to build her career, and people respected her for her sharp mind and dedication. But her heart was soft when it came to love. She had just married Mandlenkosi, a man full of big dreams and sweet words. He was an ambitious businessman who knew how to charm her. One evening, as they sat together, Mandlenkosi looked into her eyes and said, "My love, if you leave your job and help me grow my business, I promise you will live like a queen. You will never have to stress again." At first, Lusanda was unsure. She had worked so hard to reach where she was, but Mandlenkosi kept assuring her, saying their future would be brighter if she stood by him fully. He painted pictures of a grand life, big houses, expensive cars, and endless comfort. Lusanda, believing in her husband and the love they shared, finally agreed. When she handed in her resignation letter at the bank, tears filled her eyes. Her colleagues were shocked. Some whispered that she was making a mistake, but Lusanda silenced her doubts. She told herself that love and family came first. As she packed up her office, leaving behind the career she had built with sweat and late nights, her heart was heavy, but she smiled through the pain. She believed she was making the right sacrifice for her marriage and her husband's dreams. Little did she know, this sacrifice would be the beginning of a storm no one saw coming. At first, Lusanda thought everything would be fine. She cooked Mandlenkosi's favorite meals, cleaned the house till it shined, and waited every evening to welcome him with a smile. But slowly, things started to change. Mandlenkosi no longer looked at her the way he used to. He came home late, smelling of expensive cologne, and looking tired, but never explaining where he had been. The sweet words he once whispered turned into cold silence. Lusanda stayed up late some nights, waiting by the window, but her husband would walk past her without even a glance. One afternoon, while folding laundry, Lusanda heard his phone ring. She wasn't trying to snoop, but the voice on the other end caught her attention. It was soft, playful, and too familiar. The woman laughed and called him baby, and Mandlenkosi laughed back. Her heart sank when she heard him say, "Don't worry, she's just at home doing nothing as usual." That was the first time Lusanda heard about Zanele, the young secretary Mandlenkosi had recently hired. Days turned into weeks, and Mandlenkosi became even more distant. He no longer asked about her day, no longer thanked her for the meals she prepared. Instead, he started mocking her in small, painful ways. "You women think sitting at home is a job," he sneered one evening. "All you do is eat and sleep." Lusanda felt a sharp pain in her chest. This was the same man who had begged her to quit her job, who promised to take care of her like a queen. Now, he made her feel useless, like a burden. She looked at her once beautiful hands, now rough from constant work at home, and wondered if she had made the biggest mistake of her life. The respect that once filled their home was disappearing, piece by piece, and Lusanda could feel her world slowly falling apart. Lusanda's heart was full of hope that evening. It was their wedding anniversary, and even though things had been hard lately, she believed a special dinner might remind Mandlenkosi of their love. She spent the whole day cooking his favorite dishes, setting the table with candles, and even wearing the dress he once said made her look like a queen. She waited, watching the clock, each minute feeling longer than the last. But Mandlenkosi didn't come home. Worried, Lusanda decided to go out and look for him. Her hands trembled as she called a taxi to the fancy restaurant where they had celebrated before. But when she walked in, her world shattered. There he was, Mandlenkosi, sitting at a table with Zanele, laughing and feeding her dessert. Lusanda's eyes filled with tears, her heart pounding so loud she could barely breathe. She wanted to scream, but her voice was trapped in her throat. Quietly, she turned around and left, her dreams crashing around her. When Mandlenkosi finally came home that night, there was no shame in his eyes. Instead, he looked at Lusanda like she was nothing. His words cut deeper than any knife. "I want a divorce," he said coldly. "You are no longer the woman I need." Lusanda fell to her knees, begging him to think about their vows, about the life they built. But Mandlenkosi's heart had turned to stone. He packed a few things and said he was leaving, and he meant it. The next morning, Lusanda woke up alone. The house felt empty, cold, and silent. She soon discovered the cruelest truth. Everything they owned was in his name. The house, the car, the bank accounts, all locked away from her. Lusanda was left with nothing but the clothes on her back and the broken pieces of her heart. She had sacrificed everything for him, and now he had thrown her away like she meant nothing. The woman who once walked with pride was now left standing in the ruins of betrayal. Lusanda thought things couldn't get worse after Mandlenkosi left, but they did. When she ran to her family for help, hoping for comfort, they only made her pain deeper. Instead of supporting her, they blamed her. Her own mother said, "Maybe if you had been a better wife, he wouldn't have left." Her sisters whispered behind her back, saying she failed as a woman. Lusanda felt completely alone, like the whole world was against her. Days turned into weeks, and her problems kept growing. With no job and no money, the bills started piling up on her table like a mountain she couldn't climb. Electricity bills, water bills, rent, all demanding payment she didn't have. Her fridge became emptier every day, and some nights she went to bed hungry, tears soaking her pillow. The woman who once worked in a bank and lived with pride was now counting coins just to buy bread. Desperate and ashamed, Lusanda made a painful choice. She opened her jewelry box, the one filled with gifts from better days, and took out her gold chain, her wedding ring, and the earrings her late grandmother gave her. She walked to the market, head down, and sold them one by one just to buy food and pay a little rent. Each piece she sold felt like she was selling a part of her soul, but hunger left her no choice. Just when she felt like giving up, a message popped up on her phone. It was from Thabiso, her old friend from university. He had heard about her troubles and wanted to see her. When they met, Lusanda broke down in tears, and Thabiso listened patiently. He didn't blame her. Instead, he reminded her of the smart, hard-working woman she used to be. The woman who once dreamed big dreams before marriage swallowed her light. His words lit a small spark inside her heart, a spark that had almost died. For the first time in months, Lusanda felt a tiny bit of hope. Maybe her story wasn't over yet. Maybe, just maybe, she could rise again. Thabiso looked at Lusanda and saw something she had forgotten about herself, her talent. One day, he gently offered her a small job. He said, "Lusanda, I need someone I can trust to manage the accounts for my tech company. I know you can do it." At first, Lusanda was nervous. It had been so long since she worked, and her self-confidence was broken, but she needed the money, and deep inside, she wanted to feel useful again, so she accepted. The first few days were hard. Her hands shook as she typed, afraid of making mistakes. But as days turned into weeks, something amazing happened. Her old skills, the ones that once made her the best banking officer, began to shine again. She organized Thabiso's accounts so well that he started seeing more profits. His business grew, and he always praised Lusanda, telling her, "You're a genius, Lusanda. I don't know what I'd do without you." With every success, Lusanda's heart grew stronger. The woman who once cried herself to sleep was now waking up early, full of purpose. But she didn't stop there. In secret, she registered for online classes to earn new financial certifications. Late at night, while the world slept, Lusanda sat at her little table, studying hard. She wanted to be better, stronger, and unstoppable. Slowly, her confidence returned. She began to smile again. Real smiles, not the fake ones she forced before. The fire that Mandlenkosi had tried to kill was coming back, brighter than ever. She dressed better, walked taller, and when people looked at her, they saw a woman who had survived the storm and was now rising like the sun. Lusanda no longer felt like a broken wife. She was becoming a powerful woman, one step at a time. And deep in her heart, she knew this was just the beginning. In just 2 years, Lusanda's life changed in a way no one expected. The same woman who once cried alone, broken and abandoned, now stood tall and proud. With Thabiso's support and her own hard work, Lusanda co-founded her own financial consultancy. She named it Lusa Capital, after her own name, a symbol of her rebirth. But this was not just any business. Lusanda made it her mission to help other women who had been left behind like her, to regain their financial independence. She taught them how to manage money, how to save, and how to build their own futures. Her passion and honesty made people trust her. More and more women came to Lusa Capital, looking for help and leaving with hope. Lusanda's name started spreading beyond just small circles. Then one day, everything changed again. She landed a big contract with Mbabani's largest real estate firm. It was a huge deal, and suddenly, the media took notice. Newspapers and TV stations wanted to talk to this strong woman who had risen from nothing. People in the community who once whispered about her failure were now clapping for her success. Lusanda, always humble, smiled as she told her story, not to show off, but to inspire. She wanted every woman to know that no matter how hard life gets, they can rise again. Now, when Lusanda walked through the streets of Mbabane, people greeted her with respect. Women looked at her with admiration, and young girls saw her as a role model. Her eyes, once filled with pain, now shone with confidence. She dressed in bright colors, her head held high, glowing from the inside out. Lusanda had become an icon of resilience, proof that no betrayal, no hardship could keep a determined woman down. And deep inside, she knew this was only the beginning of even greater things. Mandla Nkosi, the man who once walked with so much pride, was now a shadow of himself. His once booming business started to fall apart, little by little. The same secretary, Zanele, whom he had chosen over Lusanda, betrayed him in the worst way. She had been stealing from the company for months, quietly moving money into secret accounts. And before Mandla Nkosi could even realize what was happening, Zanele disappeared, running away with another man and leaving him to face the mess alone. The news spread like wildfire. Clients pulled out, partners cut ties, and soon, Mandla Nkosi's business crumbled completely. The debts piled up higher and higher, and the banks came knocking. His once loyal friends turned their backs, not wanting to be associated with a man now drowning in disgrace. People who used to admire him now whispered and laughed behind his back. His fancy cars were taken, his house was put up for auction, and Mandla Nkosi was left with nothing but shame. With nowhere else to turn, he swallowed his pride. The same pride that once made him mock Lusanda now tasted bitter in his mouth. Desperate and broken, he picked up his phone and called her, the woman he had thrown away like trash. His voice trembled as he asked her for help. He didn't even hide it. He begged her for a loan, hoping she would take pity on him. But as he waited for her answer, he couldn't ignore the weight of his past mistakes. He remembered every cruel word he had said, every moment he had made her feel small, and now, here he was, standing in the same position she once was, helpless and alone. Karma had come full circle, and Mandla Nkosi was forced to face the bitter truth. The woman he had once betrayed was now the only one who could save him. Mandla Nkosi walked into the tall glass building with heavy steps, his heart pounding. He couldn't believe this was where Lusanda worked now. As he entered, he saw her name shining on the office wall, Lusa Capital. Everywhere he looked, people moved with purpose, greeting Lusanda with respect and admiration. She was no longer the woman he once mocked. She was now a boss, sitting in a beautiful office, dressed in power and confidence. Mandla Nkosi felt small the moment he saw her. When Lusanda finally looked up and saw him standing there, silence filled the room. He tried to smile, but his lips trembled. "Lusanda, please, I need your help," he stammered. But Lusanda leaned back in her chair, her eyes cold and steady. She remembered everything, the night he crushed her spirit, the hunger, the pain, the tears. And now, here he was, begging at her door. Mandla Nkosi tried to explain, telling her how Zanele had betrayed him, how he had lost everything, and how the world had turned its back on him. He begged for a loan, even a little help to start over. But Lusanda's voice cut through the air like a knife. She reminded him how he left her with nothing, how he called her useless, how he watched her suffer without lifting a finger. She told him that the woman he abandoned had rebuilt herself without him, and that she owed him nothing now. The staff outside watched as Mandla Nkosi, once so proud, slowly dropped to his knees right there in her office. His tears flowed as he begged for forgiveness, his voice shaking. But Lusanda remained calm, her face strong and unbothered. She told him that forgiveness is not always given, especially to those who never cared when they had power. She stood up, signaling that the meeting was over. Mandla Nkosi stayed on his knees, But Lusanda walked away, leaving him there, broken, the same way he once left her. It was the day of reckoning, the day he truly tasted the pain he had caused. And Lusanda, she walked out taller, stronger, and completely free. Lusanda sat by her window one evening, looking at the sunset. The sky was calm, and for the first time in a long while, so was her heart. She thought about everything she had gone through, the pain, the tears, the nights she went to bed hungry and hopeless. She remembered how Mandlenkosi had left her broken and alone, but as she breathed in the cool evening air, she felt no more hatred in her chest. All that pain had turned into strength, and every tear had taught her a lesson. She realized she was free, not because she got revenge, but because she refused to let anger live in her heart any longer. She had outgrown the pain, and now she only carried wisdom. Soon after, Lusanda was invited to speak at a big women's empowerment event in Mbabane. As she stood on the stage, dressed in bright colors and glowing with confidence, the hall fell silent. Women from all walks of life looked up at her, eager to hear her story. Lusanda smiled gently and began to speak. She told them about her days as a banking officer, the love she thought would last forever, and the sacrifices she made for her marriage. She shared how her world fell apart when the man she loved betrayed her and left her with nothing. But she didn't stop there. She told them about the days she struggled to find food, the nights she cried alone, and the friend who reminded her of her dreams. She spoke about finding her strength again, building her skills, and rising back even stronger. As she shared her journey of turning heartbreak into success, many women in the audience wiped tears from their eyes. Her words touched deep because they had felt the same pain too. Lusanda ended her speech by telling them they could rise too, that no betrayal, no heartbreak, no failure was strong enough to destroy a woman who decides to stand again. The hall erupted in applause. Women stood up, clapping and cheering, feeling a new fire light up inside them. Lusanda's story had given them hope and courage. That day, she didn't just close the chapter of her own pain, she opened doors of freedom for countless other women. And as she stepped down from the stage, she knew in her heart that she was truly free. Lusanda stood quietly on the balcony of her beautiful new home, feeling the soft morning breeze on her face. The sun was slowly rising, painting the sky with warm golden colors. As she watched the light spread across the hills, she felt something deep inside her. Peace, real peace. No more pain, no more anger, no more fear, just calmness and gratitude for how far she had come. She had walked through fire, but now she stood tall, stronger and wiser. Her heart, once heavy with betrayal, now felt light and free. Behind her, Thabiso stepped onto the balcony. He had been her rock through the darkest days, first as a friend, then as her business partner. Together, they had built something powerful, not just a successful company, but a shared dream. Thabiso looked at her with a soft smile and said, "Lusanda, I feel like this is just the beginning for you." His words made her heart swell, not just with pride, but with hope for what was still to come. There was a new energy between them, a quiet promise of endless possibilities. Lusanda turned to him and smiled, her eyes shining brighter than the sunrise in front of them. She knew he was right. Mandlenkosi, with all his cruelty and betrayal, was now just a closed chapter, a painful lesson, but one that made her the woman she was today. That part of her life was over, locked away with no keys. What lay ahead was fresh, unwritten, and filled with hope. As the sun rose higher, bathing them in golden light, Lusanda took a deep breath and felt alive like never before. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was living, truly living. And deep down, she knew her real story wasn't ending here. No, it was only just beginning.